Hi, folks. We will get started in just a moment. Give us just 1 or 2 minutes and we'll start running. Okay, let's get started. So good afternoon and welcome to our NOAA Learning Series on the Climate Adaptation Partnerships, or CAP program. I'm Caitlin Montan, Director for the Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs at the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. These learning series are an opportunity to hear about some of the ways in which NOAA is working with communities around the nation. And today we are going to have the opportunity to learn about the Climate Adaptation Partnership Program with a focus on the Central region. Thank you to my NOAA and CAP colleagues for participating in today's webinar. And thank you, our intergovernmental partners, for your interest in this program. A few quick logistics before we get started. All attendees have been muted. If you have questions, please put them in the questions chat box. The webinar is expected to run 1 hour. We will have presentations with 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, which our team will facilitate at the end of the presentation. Please note we are recording this briefing. The recording will be posted on our website. We will drop the link to our website where the recording will be posted in the chat. Now please join me in welcoming our NOAA Deputy Administrator, Janie Bavishi. Janie Bavishi is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and the Deputy NOAA Administrator. She is a distinguished expert in the field of climate adaptation and resilience, and before joining us at NOAA, served in the New York City Mayor's Office as the Director of the Office of Climate Resiliency, where she oversaw the implementation of climate resilient strategies for the nation's largest city. We are thrilled to have her here with us today, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, and thank you all for being here. I apologize that I'm not on video. I actually am in transit this afternoon, but really wanted to join you to at least have the opportunity to introduce the CAP program and this briefing to you. One of my goals in my position is to serve as a champion of the CAP program within NOAA and across the federal government. I see an opportunity to socialize not only the accomplishments of the network, but also the framework of engagement that supports on-the-ground decision makers and communities in the challenging and complex work of adapting to climate change. And I feel personally connected to the CAP network, having had my own experience of working with a CAP team in my previous role, as Caitlin mentioned, as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate Resilience in New York City. We relied on the Northeast CAP, otherwise known as CC Run, in a number of ways. But the example I wanted to share here was the development of a heat vulnerability index to map not only the physical indicators of heat risk, but also the social vulnerability to heat impacts. CC Run collaborated with the New York City Department of Health and the Mayor's Office to create this tool that ended up being the basis of our entire heat resilience strategy, helping us to target which neighborhoods to invest in for programs ranging from planting street trees and increasing reflective surfaces, especially rooftops, to investing in social cohesion through partnerships with community-based organizations. When other federal programs, especially in the wake of Sandy, often overlooked collaboration with local agencies, CC Run prioritized it. And CC Run's approach was focused on driving more equitable outcomes. It's really been exciting to see CAP's reputation as a leader in this field at multiple levels, from the local level, in my experience, all the way up to the White House. And in fact, both Congress and the White House have called for additional support and expansion of the network and the type of work it does. We've been very pleased to announce CAP's recent expansion into the Central Midwest and the U.S. Caribbean regions, as well as a series of CAP projects that bring together communities and expertise across regions through bipartisan infrastructure law funding. So with that, I'm pleased to hand it off to the director of the CAP program and my colleague, Chelsea Cumbus-Friedman.
Great. Thank you so much, Janie, for that kind introduction. And thank you everyone for being with us this afternoon. We are really excited to have the opportunity today to share with you how the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, or affectionately called CAP, is working hand in hand with communities and partners to co-create community solutions to weather and climate challenges. And this briefing will specifically focus on the central region of the US and how we're working across jurisdictions there. As Janie said, my name is Chelsea Cumbus-Friedman. I'm the director for the CAP program at NOAA, and this is a program that sits within the Climate Program Office. Next slide, please. All right, so at this point in time, this is probably a pretty familiar image to folks, or at least the icons on here are familiar. We have heard throughout the news, or maybe had some lived experiences with many hazard events that you see here: hurricanes, droughts, floods, or heat waves, perhaps. And this is often where we begin the conversation when we speak with communities about extreme weather and climate, by talking about or by organizing our resources or information around these very particular singular hazards. But these hazards don't really represent the complete picture of risk that a local community or decision-making community is contending with at any particular time. The reality is that many of these hazards are happening simultaneously, or they're happening back to back, and that compounds the risk that communities are experiencing, and it makes the policy and planning environment in which those decisions have to happen much more difficult. So many more kind of complex trade-offs to consider. Next slide, please. And so in order to help us address this challenge and to meet people where they are, CAP is a program that really starts with the social context, with people and their interests and their values, and brings climate into that. We know that the institutional environment and the culture and the capacity of a place matters a lot in how people not only view, but also solve weather and climate challenges. This map is showing us the areas in the United States that have the lowest capacity to respond to climate change, and it was created by a CAP partner and member of the Pacific Northwest CAP team, Headwaters Economics. Next slide, please. So a cornerstone of the program, the CAP program's approach, is building trusted and lasting partnerships across many different sectors: academia, local government, nonprofits, businesses, and geographic communities. And CAP does that by funding primarily funding regional teams that are made up of diverse experts and local partners across these sectors and organization types. Our funding is distributed through 5-year cooperative agreements, which is a kind of grant that's between NOAA and a team of institutions across multiple states or territories. And these regions that we fund are competed every 5 years, so it is a competitive program. But many of the teams have successfully competed and stayed in place for over 15 years at this point. So our goal is really to build lasting networks and capacity in regions, and to fund those regions to do this work for a long time. While the regional teams are responsive, they're meant to be very responsive to the needs in the region, so they look quite different in terms of the sorts of topics that they work on and their governance structures kind of across the country. There are some core elements of the CAP model that do remain the same, and that's what you're seeing in that ring diagram there on the right-hand side of the slide. And so those core elements are things like lasting partnerships, building lasting partnerships, doing collaborative research, doing community engagement, informing decision-making, and maybe most importantly, capacity building for the long term. So in this model, and when we think about collaborative research, what we're talking about are the information needs really being defined at the community level or by decision makers, the communities and those decision makers then participating in the research design and the process as equal knowledge holders, so bringing together scientific and non-scientific knowledge, and then the benefits of that work, the advice, the tools, the information that are developed, being received by and used by the communities. And this enables more informed decisions, and also, maybe more importantly, increases the capacity on the ground to advance place-based climate solutions. Next slide, please. CAP currently has active regional teams in 13 regions across the US. As Janie mentioned, the Central Midwest, who you'll hear from today, is our newest team, and that was the 13th team to be added to the network. And we've also funded activities in order to help us expand CAP work into some additional regions. Those are the 3 regions you're seeing here that are sort of shaded in gray. So that's not where we have a full team, but where we have started to fund some expansion activities, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. And across the network, we have many different partners. So in any given year, the network is working with over 400 communities, hundreds of state and local agency partners and private sector partners, and we're informing over 130 plans, policies, and actions. Next slide, please. So after about a decade of declining budget levels, in 2020, the CAP program received its first directed increase in congressional appropriations. We are, of course, really grateful to Congress for recognizing not just the work of this network, but really the increasing demand for this kind of work, and for providing increasing appropriation levels that have allowed us to better serve the states and territories across the country. The blue on this graph is representing our base budget, and then the red represents the Inflation Reduction Act funding that the program has received to support the 13th CAP team, the 5-year CAP team that's in the Central Midwest. And as you probably could see from the map on the previous slide, there is still more work to do. We still have some gaps to fill in order to have teams across the entire country. So looking forward, we do continue to strive to meet the growing demands, and pending available appropriations, we do aim to expand coverage to all states and territories. Next slide, please. And so as we work toward building the base budget to support full teams in each region, as I had mentioned, we And these positions have been really useful in places where there's a need for coordination of information and services and funding, but lower capacity to address weather and climate challenges. Next slide, please. So we're also really grateful to Congress for the supplemental bipartisan allowing us to more readily test, scale, and transfer knowledge or approaches across the US to better support communities in responding to complex flooding and wildfire risks. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in learning more about the national program, feel free to access our 2-pager. We also have a story map, and these I think will be linked in the chat as well. Our CAP website is on here. And next slide. And now we'd love to move into a discussion to talk a little bit more about our what work is going on in communities and regions across the central part of the United States. So I'm really pleased to introduce a very esteemed panel of CAP Central Midwest Climate Adaptation Specialist. All right, I think we can move into the next slide. Great. And with that, I'd like to start by asking the panel to describe a complex climate challenge in your region and give an example of how you're addressing it. And if you wouldn't mind briefly introducing yourself first and your regional team before answering the question. So Tori, I'm going to turn things over to you to start us off.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Chelsea. As she mentioned, I'm Tori Field. I'm a Sustained Engagement Specialist with the Great Lakes CAP team, or GLESA. And before I jump into the question, I want to give a quick overview of our team. We were established in 2010, and we serve the 8 states surrounding the Great Lakes, as well as the province of Ontario in Canada. And we're really an interdisciplinary team of social and physical scientists, researchers, staff, students, and practitioners from multiple academic institutions. We're housed at the University of Michigan, but we also have funded partners at Michigan State University, the University of Wisconsin, and the College of Menominee Nation. And in our region, we serve a wide range of partners, but most of our work really focuses on partnerships and collaboration with cities or local governments and tribes and indigenous communities. So to come back to your question about complex challenges, we have a wide range of projects and programs that help us tackle these issues. So one example of this is our Small Grants program, which has allowed us to re-grant part of our NOAA funds 42 organizations leading impactful projects on the ground. We also tackle complex challenges by working with partners to co-develop engagement approaches and decision support tools, and these help us apply NOAA's climate information to decision making. An example of this is our Floodwise Communities program, and this provides free access to technical support to help communities complete stormwater vulnerability assessments. So broadly, vulnerability assessments can be used as a tool for assessing climate risk and helping communities prioritize areas for action. But these assessments can also be pretty expensive and time intensive. So in 2017, at the request of our city partners, we started to explore ways to make these assessments more accessible and find ways to integrate both climate and socioeconomic data into the process. So we started off with a framework to assess broad climate risk and vulnerability, but as we worked with more communities in our region, we found that many wanted to focus on assessing the complex vulnerability and risk related to stormwater and flooding, which is very prevalent here in the Great Lakes region. So over the years, we've worked with other CAP teams, nonprofits, consultants, and most importantly, local governments themselves to develop and refine a program that we now call the Floodwise Communities Program. So if you go to the next slide, I can provide a little more information on that program. So when we work with communities through Floodwise, we first have them assemble an interdepartmental team of staff and partners to work on the assessment together. It's really a collaborative process. Then a GLISA facilitator or another facilitator on our team guides them through 3 key steps in an online tool. First, it'll set the foundation for the assessment by getting familiar with local climate and socioeconomic data that we customize for them. And importantly, we also prioritize their local knowledge and experience in that process. Next, participants work through the vulnerability assessment, and this is where they'll assess the sensitivity and adaptive capacity of individual stormwater components. And then finally, once the assessment's complete, participants can view the results and discuss next steps. An important part of the tool is that it tracks responses throughout all 3 of these steps, and at the end, participants can access the final scores of their assessment and a full report of the results. One aspect I do want to emphasize about this program is that we use a wide range of local data and information to guide the discussions. The cities we worked with felt it was really important to not just focus on the climate science behind stormwater and flooding, but also to think about the people that are impacted by these hazards. And this part makes it very complex. So to complement the program, our partners at Headwaters Economics developed the Neighborhoods at Risk tool, which really helps identify areas within a community that may experience a greater and disproportionate vulnerability to climate impacts. So identifying this disproportionate vulnerability can help communities take proactive steps to limit these direct impacts in these areas. As an example, Neighborhoods at Risk could help a community identify an area with higher flood risk that also has a high population of community members who don't speak English as their primary language. And with this information, they could draft resources and response efforts that are using multiple languages that are appropriate for the community. And to date, we've successfully completed Floodwise with more than 50 communities. And I also want to recognize our colleagues at SCIP who are on the call today that helped in this process. So looking ahead, we're looking forward to working with even more communities in the Great Lakes region and growing the program to focus in on things like public health and community voices. So with that, I am excited to be joined by one of our past Floodwise participants, Jason Kaufman from the city of Goshen, Indiana. And Jason and his team collaborated with this project from 2018 to 2020, and they helped us customize the process to stormwater and flooding, which is a very real issue in their community that he'll be able to share more about next.
Great, thank you so much, Tori. And Jason, would love to turn it over to you next to talk a little bit about a complex climate challenge that your city faces and how the Great Lakes CAP team GLISA partnered with you to help address it.
Yes, thank you, Chelsea and Tori. I appreciate the opportunity to share how the city of Goshen benefited from participating in the Floodwise Communities program. Again, my name is Jason Kaufman, and I've been working in the stormwater field since August of 2006, first with the Elkhart County Soil and Water Conservation District, and then for the last 10 years as the stormwater coordinator for the city of Goshen, which is located in northern Indiana, about 45 minutes east of the University of Notre Dame in South Bend. The city of Goshen is not unique in the climate change challenges it faces, but the solutions the city employs will be unique, as it will be for any community. And for Goshen, flooding is one such challenge that rose to the surface 6.5 years ago. In February of 2018, my colleagues and I, we learned what a historic flood looks like in our community. The Elkhart River, which drains 595 square miles to the center of our city, reached a historic crest of 12.53 feet. This was over half a foot higher than the previous historic crest, which happened in March of 1982. This flood inundated commercial and residential areas, parkland and floodplains, and caused 3 of the 5 roads that crossed the river to be closed for several days. This event happened because we had 12 inches of snow on the ground, which melted quickly, along with nearly 5 inches of rain falling in less than 48 hours, all associated with warmer temperatures than normal. And these are conditions that research shows are going to be happening more and more often. However, urban flooding caused by inadequate stormwater conveyance systems is also a concern for Goshen. For example, during rain events, stormwater flows out of the hills southwest of Goshen along numerous drainage pathways that at one time had reached the Elkhart River. But over the years, development has ignored, interrupted, redirected, and reduced these drainage pathways and increased hard surface areas, removed beneficial vegetation, and reduced tree canopy. This has resulted in flooding in residential neighborhoods. To alleviate some of these flooding issues, a diversion ditch was installed in 1987 to capture stormwater runoff and to redirect it to the Elkhart River. Although it worked, we still have some areas that experience flooding during extreme rain events. 1 year after the historic flood of February 2018, a childhood friend of mine who was on the GLISA team reached out to see if the city of Goshen would be interested in participating in a pilot program to determine the best ways to use a stormwater vulnerability assessment tool that was being developed. Participating in this pilot program made perfect sense to my team and I, and with the approval of Goshen's mayor, we began the process to understand better how climate change will impact the city's stormwater infrastructure in the years to come. As part of the pilot program, Goshen met virtually with GLISA staff to learn about the program's stormwater vulnerability assessment components and how to use them. They included a very detailed workbook to evaluate different system components on their sensitivity to climate change and their adaptive capacities. It included a report template, which was pre-populated with data specific to the city of Goshen, which was very helpful in finishing the report, and access to a tool called Neighborhoods at Risk from Headwaters Economics, which allowed us to evaluate our community's socioeconomic characteristics and to understand how different parts of the city are resilient or vulnerable to climate change. The socioeconomic information provided by Neighborhoods at Risk matched with what I saw during the flood damage inspections that I completed after that February 2018 flood, where it showed that the more vulnerable were greatly impacted. I was impressed with the amount of detail and guidance that these tools provided my team. And even though the process to complete the assessment took far longer than I had hoped due to staff changes and the COVID-19 pandemic, the support that I received from GLISA staff never wavered. In 2020, the city hired a consultant to prepare a flood resilience plan to be better prepared for future flood events. And the information gathered through the stormwater vulnerability assessment provided some of the foundation upon which Goshen's flood resilience plan was built. The information gained by participating in the FloodWise program is allowing city staff to push forward with other projects and to strengthen community and regional partnerships as we work to be more resilient to the impacts of a changing climate. 2 examples of this work are the starting stages of creating a flood response plan for the city of Goshen, and also partnering with a local watershed organization called the Elkhart River Restoration Association as they update their watershed management plan. The city recognizes that problems do not start or stop at the city limits, but extend outward into the watersheds that we are connected to. If your community is looking to better understand the impacts of climate vulnerability and flood resilience, I highly recommend the FloodWise Communities program. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. For our second question, I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on the demand for the kind of work that CAP does. But before we go there, a quick reminder that if you do have questions for Tori or Jason, please do put them in the question and answer chat, and we will get to those at the end of this webinar. So Congress has asked that CAP expand to serve all states and territories in the United States. We know that there is a high demand for CAP services, not just in the regions where we do have existing teams, but in regions where we don't. So Brandy, I'd like to turn to you first. The Central Midwest CAP team is the newest to the network, and we'd love to hear from you about what prompted your team's interest in the CAP program and how this new team is helping to meet the demand or fill a gap that you see in the region.
Sure, thanks very much. So our team is the newest team to be funded. We cover Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, and Kansas. So this is new territory for the CAP program. My name is Brandy Jansen. I'm the lead PI, and I'm based at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. So our approach is one of collaborative learning, where we recognize that our scientific expertise sitting in the academic space is really only part of the story, and that the lived experiences and knowledge of our community partners are really critical to our collaborative project. But one motivator to apply for the funding is actually its emphasis and its true respect for interdisciplinary work, which is actually pretty rare among federal funding opportunities. So I'm an anthropologist by training. I'm located in a college of public health. In addition, on our academic leadership team, we have a faculty member from an English department who's a Shakespearean scholar with experience in community-based storytelling. We have a climatologist, a hydrologist, and climate modeler. And then we have partner institutions across the 4 states in our region. So the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Nebraska Indian Community College, as well as a number of community advisory partners, such as the Women, Food, and Agriculture Network, the Center for Rural Affairs, and the Environmental Protection Office at the Santee Sioux Nation. But beyond that, a more important motivator for us applying for the funding was that this mechanism really allows us to engage with populations in our region that have not been historically included in formal climate adaptation and resilience planning. And in this first cycle, we're focusing on women landowners and tribal nations in the region. So since our funding started in September of 2023, we've started our work by prioritizing a community grant program so we can get resources directly to community members, and that also helps us with that learning process and understanding how our community partners, what their concerns are, and how they want to solve problems. So we have projects currently funded with the Santee Sioux Nation, which is located in what is now northeast Nebraska. These projects will help the tribe expand their environmental monitoring network and develop better infrastructure so that they can make better informed local decisions around climate resilience planning. And then these projects also have education and outreach components among tribal members about the monitoring stations and how they'll be used. And then we have a number of projects with various groups of women landowners, our other focal community. And these are frequently about sort of story-based events, events that bring women together to talk about conservation practices, and in many cases then also provide direct resources to those women to try new conservation practices like pollinator habitat or buffers or prairie or something on their land. So as these projects develop, we're really excited to learn more about how women landowners approach new conservation strategies and what types of practices are most achievable for them. And then we can scale this knowledge up beyond these initial projects. And women in our region, women landowners are actually a pretty interesting group. About 30% of farmland across all 4 states is managed by one principal operator who is female. And in the state of Iowa, this is my favorite fun fact about us, 13% of our farmland is owned by women over the age of 80. So in many cases, these are women who have inherited land from their parents or their spouses who have passed away, and they're now interested in learning from other women in particular about conservation practices, how they might work with tenants, and generally seeking social support for decision making. And this is really important for our region because individual land ownership is really critical to the overall climate resilience discussion. So our project can not only help provide climate planning services directly to this group of landowners, which is often not a service provided by other agencies, it can provide direct support for trying new strategies on land and ultimately making them more competitive in the long run for other opportunities from other agencies, such as USDA grants or things like that. The CAP funding also allows us to connect communities with other services by convening a number of other partner organizations such as the USDA Climate Hub, the regional climate centers, and provide direct support for the locally relevant activities that they're most interested in. So we're really excited as we get started into continuing to develop partnerships and connect with communities across the region. We really started our funding cycle focusing on Iowa and Nebraska. And we're looking forward to continuing our work and getting more embedded in Missouri and Kansas as well.
Thank you so much, Brandy. And that's a perfect segue to Emily. Emily, I'd love to invite you to speak about the demand for climate adaptation support that you see in the central Midwest and maybe particularly across Kansas and Missouri, which are the other two states in that 4-state CAP region, and how your CAP position is helping to meet that demand in a way that complements the work of the Central Midwest team. Over to you.
Thanks, Chelsea. So good afternoon. My name is Emily Edens Roundtree, and I am the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Specialist for the Central Midwest. So I cover the same states as Brandy, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. My position is unique for the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program in that it is independent of the CAP regional research teams, and I'm a separate full-time position for the region based in Kansas City. So Brandy and I are close colleagues, and we build on each other's work, but serve different functions for the NOAA CAP in the Central Midwest region. So as the partnerships specialist, my position is centered on partnership development, capacity building, and increasing the interconnectedness of climate adaptation work throughout the Central Midwest. So my charge is to build awareness and capacity, inform planning, share best practices, and just generally support climate adaptation work at a regional scale. So as NOAA CAP has recently expanded into the Central Midwest, they worked to establish a mentorship structure for me to provide extra support and guidance and insight and more connections in the region. So here in Kansas City, I'm housed at the Mid-America Regional Council, which is the metropolitan planning organization and council of governments for the Kansas City region. And so there, I'm part of a climate team, and I'm assisting in the advancement of regional climate goals and planning. And there I'm mentored by Tom Jacobs, who is their regional Chief Resilience Officer, who really has been pivotal in environmental sustainability and climate work in Kansas City for more than 25 years. And you'll get to hear from him in it. A key reason for housing me at the Mid-America Regional Council is their deep and long-lasting connections with local governments. So NOAA CAP also set up 2 additional mentors, including Doug Cluck, the NOAA Central Region Climate Services Director. So he plugs me into the climate science and federal level happenings in the region. And the third mentor is Ward Lyles, who is the director of the Center for Compassionate Communities at the University of Kansas. And he helps me stay connected to higher education and research activities in the region. So in this new and unique position for NOAA CAP, they were really intentional and strategic in providing a layered structure for support and connections to assist me in my work. So this position fills a gap in the region by working with and building upon existing networks. And I get to work at different scales at the regional, state, and local levels. And so some really strong networks exist at those multiple levels and are working to increase collaboration and advances in climate adaptation, resilience, and sustainability. Networks like the Midwest Climate Collaborative, the Urban Sustainability Directors Network of the Heartland, the Climate and Energy Project in Kansas, to name a few. And these networks serve as key connectors for knowledge exchange and partnership in the region, and I've been working to develop close partnerships with them in my role. So also, since beginning my position nearly a year ago, I've been on a listening tour of local government's climate programs, policies, and needs in the area, and really learned that a lot of them want to tell their story of climate work better, not only to elevate the Central Midwest at the federal and state levels, but also promote interconnectedness through better understanding of each other's work at the regional level. So I've also learned that the region has received less federal attention in climate adaptation than other regions, and there are some capacity gaps. So to help tell that story of climate adaptation work in the region, I've begun to assemble a Resilient Success Stories report. The report is meant to feature exemplary adaptation work while drawing attention to those gaps and needs. So an example success story includes the city of Lincoln, Nebraska's citywide effort to identify and secure a second water source, because the Platte River is too vulnerable to drought to be their only water source long term. Or Douglas County, Kansas's robust community engagement plan that sought to include as many voices from frontline communities as they could in the development of their climate adaptation plan. So another gap that I'm working to fill in the region is unmet climate-related data needs at the local government level. So on that listening tour, sustainability managers shared how more climate-related data could help them continue to advance climate plans and help continue to legitimize their climate work within their local governments. So examples of what they told me in conversation include the economic impact of converting to less car infrastructure, the cost of inaction regarding climate plans, so what happens if we don't move these climate plans forward, and general data that makes the case for climate action. So I partnered with the Kansas Data Science Consortium to work with the cities to see how we might be able to fill those needs. So in sum, there's really good forward-thinking work being accomplished in the Central Midwest, and I look forward to showcasing that. But it's also clear that a lot of work remains to be done, and NOAA CAP's presence in the area is really certainly making an impact. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'd like to transition us a little bit to hearing more about how CAP collaborates with local partners and communities on the ground in this region. And so Tom, I'm going to turn to you first. As Emily mentioned, the Central Midwest CAP position that she occupies was purposely housed at the Mid-America Regional Council, or MARC. So if you could tell us a little bit about the ways that MARC works to collaborate with local partners and communities and the impact of the partnership with CAP on your organization, that would be great.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, and thank you, Emily. I'm Tom Jacobs. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer at Mid-America Regional Council, or MARC. And MARC is the Association of Local Governments in the Kansas City metro area. We work with 119 municipalities and 9 counties in a bi-state metro area of about 2.1 million people. And our business is building collaborations and partnerships to solve cross-boundary problems. And so climate is chief among those things. And we've worked for a long time on issues of air quality and watershed management and natural area protection and restoration and many more issues. And all of those sorts of efforts require deep collaborations across our city and county boundary lines. In 2021, our board of directors, which is made up of 33 local elected officials, adopted our regional climate action plan. And it was a really hard lift. Our plan included and engaged over 1,000 people from across our community, from artists to engineers, architects, landscape architects, planners, natural area managers, NGO representatives, and more. And we built a plan that addresses all of the usual topics, whether it's buildings and energy or transportation or natural areas and green infrastructure or job creation and workforce development. And all of that work was focused really ultimately on trying to address issues of environmental justice and public health in our community. And we did this by mobilizing these networks, some of whom are represented in the picture here. And we did that work with a lot of heart. It was really fun. This particular workshop, we had about 200 people sharing, why they were involved in this process and how deeply they cared about all of this work. And so where we are today is we're trying to build capacity to be able to implement this scale from a neighborhood level to a city or county level to a regional or larger scales. And so the partnership with the Central Midwest CAP is just, it fits like a hand in glove. Emily has just been an invaluable member of our team in trying to help us find ways to get traction in terms of plan implementation. She's connected us to regional and national best practices, helped build connections with universities, other federal agencies, the extremely talented team from Iowa. And she supported a lot of work in creating more local connectivity and capacity building, especially with different community-based organizations serving frontline communities. And the needs are the needs are significant, whether we're talking about food security or energy and water burdens, heat islands, or other factors. And so we're trying to build capacity at all these different levels, and the nature of our work is directly aligned with the mission and focus of the climate adaptation program. So I guess I would want to conclude by saying that investment in a program like this from the federal level is exactly what we need to be able to help all of us make the kind of progress we aspire to achieve to deal with these incredibly complex challenges that are posed by climate change. So with that, Chelsea, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that perspective. Rachel, I'm going to turn to you next. I'd love if you could introduce the South Central team, CAP team, and share an example of how your team is collaborating with local partners and communities. You know, how are you thinking about developing a meaningful partnership and the sorts of resources that are necessary to sustain them?
Yes, thank you, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. I am Rachel Riley, the director of the South Central team, also known as the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program. And I work at the University of Oklahoma, which is our lead institution. And we're also closely partnered with Louisiana State University, Texas Sea Grant, and Adaptation International. And we cover the 4 states you see on the screen. We're one of the more seasoned teams in that we were established in 2008. And some of our institutional partners and research foci have changed over the years. But our current research projects relate to 4 themes. Those include climate-informed planning, developing governance and collaborative capacity, extreme events in a changing climate, and climate justice. And given that my region faces a myriad of climate-related challenges, much of our work involves a multi-hazard context, including threats exacerbated by climate change. We work with different stakeholders depending on topics and needs, but some of the recent collaborators include the National Hazard Mitigation Association, Louisiana Department of Health, the Disaster Resilience Network, and numerous city and county officials. Next slide, please. So one of our resources that stem from conversations with city and county officials is our simple planning tool for climate hazards. Through workshops that took place in 2017 and 2018 in Oklahoma and Arkansas, followed by additional input from stakeholders in Texas and Louisiana, we have a tool that is tailored to each of the 4 states that we serve. Each version of the tool contains links and instructions to historical climate data tools organized by hazard type, climate change trends by hazard type, limited climate projection tools, and additional information that we have learned is helpful for planning processes. So the image you see on your screen shows an example of what the simple planning tool looks like when a user goes to the historical data tools section for Arkansas cold extremes. There are more tools, individual tools available than what is shown on the screen. And if you scroll down even further, if you were to go to our website, you'll see the climate change trends section. You can find this tool by going to the URL listed on your screen, and I believe it'll also be posted in the chat. So the URL that's listed will bring you to the landing page where you can select the state that you're interested in. And by the way, many of the individual tools listed within the overall tool are available for the entire country or a large portion of the country. So if you're listening today and you're not from one of the 4 states that my team serves, especially if you're east of the Rocky Mountains, you'll likely find individual data tools that are relevant to your area. And the coastal tools are located within the Texas and Louisiana versions of the Simple Planning tool. The Simple Planning tool helps practitioners locate climate and natural hazard data that is needed for their plans, and it helps save them time, along with reducing the mental burden of having to search for information when they don't know where to find it or what information to trust. Back in 2019, I conducted a formal study to learn the types of plans that had been informed by this Simple Planning tool, among other findings. While the number of users was limited at the time, there was a breadth of impact. The plans you see listed on the screen and the bullet points are the types of plans that had been informed by the Simple Planning tool at the time of the study. These data were collected only 1 to 2 years following the initial publication of the tool and was prior to the Louisiana and Texas versions being available. We're planning to conduct a broader study as a follow-up in about a year. So in summary, the idea for this tool stemmed from conversations that took place at workshops that SCIP organized. And over the years, through formal and informal mechanisms, we've invited community partners, including local and county government officials, to provide feedback on various components of the tool. That feedback led to the current version that is available on our website. We are aware of additional features that are desired, and we hope to be able to implement those features someday pending available resources. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. And Tina, I'd love to turn to you for the last word here in the panel. You've worked closely with the South Central CAP team, SCIP, from your position at the Northwest Arkansas Development District. What has been unique and meaningful about the CAP partnership with SCIP for you? And please feel free to take a moment to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Chelsea and Rachel, for inviting me to participate in this. My name is Tina Cole. I am a Community Development Coordinator with the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District in Harrison, Arkansas, where we're housed. We are one of 8 planning districts in the state. Our district represents 9 counties and 72 cities in Northwest Arkansas. And my main focus as a Community Development Coordinator is developing and preparing mitigation plans and mitigation projects in my district for the past 9 years, which I absolutely love doing. With the other 8 districts, we also have community development coordinators like myself that write these mitigation plans. And my partnership with Rachel at SCIP, from the very first workshop that I attended with them, they were very professional, knowledgeable, and approachable when discussing the areas of mitigation planning that I was struggling with as a planner. They listened and took our thoughts and ideas back to their drawing table and developed a planning tool that is not only user-friendly, but has information that is not readily available to my small rural communities and myself that have trouble sorting through all the mitigation information that's out there in internet land. As the planning tool developed, I got to attend other meetings and workshops, and they continued to build on the feedback that my peers and I discussed with them. So they were meeting our needs and listening to us, which was phenomenal for what we're doing. The simple planning tool includes data such as definition and descriptions of each hazard. This is so helpful to maintain consistent information for all of my plans. We have 9 counties, like I said, and I have written 8, working on my last new plan for my district, and which was my goal when I started working here 9 years ago. The consistent information, they also provide links to resources such as maps, historical data, and climate change information. When FEMA updated their mitigation plan requirements last year, climate change was a huge element that had to be included in our mitigation plans. At that time, there was very little information available to planners like me, and my plans were frequently sent back for revisions to my climate change sections. The simple planning tool has included climate change information that has made these new requirements for plans a lot easier to get data and information from to include in my mitigation plans and acceptable to my FEMA reviewers. So when developing a plan for my small rural communities, the simple planning tool has also made it so much better for me to help my elected officials understand their risks based on solid and accurate information. As we all know, assessing the risks that our communities are susceptible to is a key factor in developing a usable mitigation plan, and also develop projects that will reduce or eliminate the devastating losses from the natural hazards that affect our communities across the nation, not only just Arkansas. It also helps develop a mitigation plan that has consistent and accurate information, but also other resources that are available to enhance and include in my mitigation plans. The partnerships and relationships that I've been blessed to develop with Rachel and Darian, specifically at CAP, are a constant resource for me and what I do for my communities. After our last workshop, I felt that this information was a valuable tool for not only me, but for the other mitigation planners in the state of Arkansas that work in the other planning development districts. I've reached out to them to bring us together to share our obstacles and resources and get additional training so that we can better serve our communities. I look forward to working with my fellow planners and with the folks at CAP to add to the resources that we currently have so that our mitigation plans get better and provide the tools that our communities need to protect their residents. And I thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this briefing. And I just can't say enough good things about Rachel and her team at South Central. Thank you.
Tina, thank you so much. And with that, that rounds out our panel for today. So we do have about 10 minutes left on the call. If there are questions, we're happy to take questions for the panelists or for the CAP management team at NOAA about the national level program. So you can put any questions you might have in the chat. And I think there is a specific Q&A chat, but any way you get them in the chat, we will probably see them. I believe that we have put the contact information for all of the panelists in the chat as they've spoken, but on this slide, you have some contact information for the 3 teams that CAP has in the central US. So please do feel free to reach out to them directly if you have additional questions about their work. And I think on the next slide, we also have some contact information to reach the Office of Legislative Affairs at NOAA if you have questions for the national program, our national level website, our briefing sheet, and our story map if you'd like more information about the broader national program and website, and network. So with that, I'm gonna actually turn it over to my colleague on the CAP team, Sean Bath, who is going to help moderate the question and answer time we have if any questions come in. For to you, Sean.
And no questions initially. Remind everyone that there is a questions Q&A tab that you can submit a question. Feel free, don't be shy. Feel free to submit any question you have on your mind. As an initial prompt, just to get us going here, we can ask the teams that are on, the panelists that are on, what state level partnerships they have. Does anybody want to take that? Which is with state agencies. Don't our panelists be shy now too? Yeah, Rachel, go ahead. You were the one I was thinking, especially.
Okay, great. Yeah, a couple of examples we've worked with state agencies include the Oklahoma Department of Emergency Management, various things over the years, kind of informal working groups and reviewing documents and getting ideas from them. That's kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. Also, we have a project ongoing with the Louisiana Department of Health looking at heat-related illnesses and wet bulb globe temperature trends and all these things. And that work is really in depth with having a SCIP employee working directly with the Department of Health. So those are 2 of the, I guess, more recent interactions we've had with some state agencies.
Do you want to give a perspective from the Great Lakes?
Sean, I thought that perhaps I might offer a perspective from Kansas City. So
go ahead.
In Kansas City, we commonly work with a variety of state agencies, both on the Kansas and Missouri sides. We work with both departments of transportation on a routine basis, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, with the Missouri Department of Conservation, with the state emergency management agencies. oftentimes our role is to serve as an intermediary to bridge local, state, and federal agencies, depending on the nature of the funding program or the regulatory program or the problem at hand. And in every case, in our part of the country, state leadership on climate issues is perhaps less advanced. And so we find opportunities to embed these sorts of questions, sometimes surreptitiously and sometimes more overtly, in ways that we think can help move the needle to address, all the different issues that we have.
Thanks, Tom. All right, still no questions queued. We might end it early if we don't have any questions. So last chance if anybody's curious about anything. And again, while we wait, does anybody want to take on, I know Tom would be interested in this, but does anybody want to take on why regional is important?
I appreciate your queuing that up for me. As a regional planner, I'm always interested in this question of scaling. As we work, at a neighborhood level in environmental justice communities, we'll work from, a neighborhood or community scale and think about then how do we help city and county governments advance their resilience and sustainability planning. There's a lot of effort that goes into watershed restoration. There's some questions that are best addressed at a regional level through cooperative efforts. A lot of those things wrap around, shared interests, water quality, air quality, flood risk reduction, grid stability, energy efficiency, these sorts of issues. And we're trying, and we're uniquely situated to try and work with state and federal folks and smaller community folks, and to create bridges and connections that otherwise might be lost. And so I'm a very strong advocate for being able to provide support at each of these different levels of scale to be able to address the different issues at hand, and then to try and connect them when the opportunities arise.
Thanks, Tom. Any other closing thoughts from the CAP panelists? Okay. All right, now I will turn it over to Annie from OLAA to close us out. Oh, and thank you, everyone. This was absolutely fantastic.
Thanks, Sean. Just a reminder to everyone that the webinar recording will be made available in the next few days on NOAA's Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs website, which is linked in the chat. And otherwise, thank you again to our speakers, partners, and to everyone who participated and listened in today. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.